So much for the Celtics this year, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, well-
It's a great fundamental team. They'll be back.
Yeah.
We'll get them next year.
I tried to tell my two sons that last night, but they realize they're very analytical.
Yeah. Problem is, Game 3 got everybody's hopes up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But you can't build a winning series on 50-point games.
No. But what a superstar that kid.
Yeah.
Tatum. I liked him from the get-go, and then he put some weight on, buffed up a bit, got more confident even. I said, wow, here he goes.
Yeah, no, it's been amazing to see the transformation.
Is this a budget hearing or an update on sports? No, I'm joking. Hi, Councilor Bach. Hey, everyone. Hey,
Good morning, Councilor Campbell.
Yeah,
Good morning,
Sports Talk, hosted by the Ways and Means Committee. We were moving on to the Bruins next, Councilor Campbell.
I love it.
Hard loss last night. The night before, whatever, 2 nights ago.
That's right. All the nights are running together, all the
They
days.
really
Good
are.
to see you guys. Good morning. Hi,
Listen.
Kelly. Hi, Councilor Flynn.
Good morning.
As the district councilor for both the Garden and Fenway Park, this is part of the job, Councilor Campbell.
You have to stay up to date for your constituents.
Yes, it's a real hardship. All right. I think, so I'm ready to get going. It looks like we're streaming on YouTube. Carrie or Candace, are we ready on the technology side?
I'm ready to go when you are, Madam Chair.
Great. Chief Irish, Commissioner, do we have everybody you guys were waiting on?
I believe we're all ready to go.
All right, excellent. In that case, I'm calling this hearing of the Boston City Council's Ways and Means Committee to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also the Chair of the Council's Ways and Means Committee. This hearing is being recorded. It's being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. It's part of a council review process that encompasses about 35 working sessions and hearings, talking to all our departments about their proposed budgets. And we're coming to the end of that phase of the budget process. So we'll do the last of those hearings this Friday. And we do encourage members of the public to come get involved. So there's a number of ways you can testify. You can send us an email with your written testimony at ccc.wm@boston.gov. That's WM as in Ways and Means. So ccc.wm@boston.gov. You can go to boston.gov/budget-testify and sign up to come and join us in one of these Zooms and speak about any given department. So if you want to come join us for this one today on the Inspectional Services Department, you should go to boston.gov/budget-testify. You can also there upload a video of yourself, which we can append to a future budget hearing so that folks can see your video testimony. And we will be having a dedicated public testimony hearing this Thursday, aka tomorrow at 6 p.m. Where we'll jump straight into public testimony. So if you have a comment on any department and you haven't had a chance to come to the other hearings and the evening is better for you, please do come tomorrow night at 6 and add your voice on the city's budget. You can also informally tweet us your questions and thoughts on the budget using the hashtag BOSSBudget, BOS budget. So we hope to hear from you. And if you want to see the schedule of hearings for the rest of this week, you can go to boston.gov/council-budget. Today's hearing is on docket 0524 to 0526, orders for the FY22 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations, for the school department, and for other post-employment benefits. Docket 0527 to 0528, orders for capital fund transfer appropriations, and docket 0529 to 0531, orders for the capital budget, including loan orders and lease purchase agreements. That's the summary of the full set of budget dockets that have been introduced by the administration. But our focus area for the day will be the Inspectional Services Department, also known as ISD. I'm pleased to be joined by my colleagues, Councilor Ed Flynn of District 2, Councilor Liz Braden of District 9, Councilor Andrea Campbell of District 4, Councilor Anissa Sabi George at large, and Councilor Julia Mejia at large. Very grateful to Chief of Operations Dion Irish and the Interim Commissioner of ISD, Sean Leiden, for joining us today, along with some of their assistant commissioners and their chief of staff, who I'll allow them to introduce. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Chief Dion Irish to start us off.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to all the esteemed members of the City Council. It always gives me great pleasure to be able to speak about a department that does so much for the city, and the department that I'm is very dear and near to my heart. It started with ISD in 1995, and I know how ISD touches everyone in so many different ways. I'm also happy to say that in FY21, ISD had a very successful year, thanks to your partnership and thanks to the great team over there at ISD. A lot of work was being done despite the pandemic and the challenges that it brought. There was a ton of work going on and improvements made on improving our processes and our systems, outreach and education, increasing transparency, increasing ethics. There's been just so much work that I'm happy to turn over to the team and have them really get into a little more details and give you an update on that. I look forward to a successful FY22, hopefully with approval of Mayor Janey's budget. And I know that with the great team that we have at ISD, it will be a success, and it all starts at the top. So it gives me a great pleasure to also introduce our next speaker, Commissioner Sean Leiter. Commissioner Leiter has been with the department for over 20 years. He's extremely knowledgeable in every aspect of ISD. And he also is a veteran who served our country for 6 years. And so I also want to just take the time just to reflect on Memorial Day weekend and all the folks who have, given their lives for this country and who are serving this country and who have served this country. So with no further ado, I want to turn it over to Commissioner Sean Leiter.
Thank you very much, Chief Irish. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the council. Thank you for having me first and foremost. As Chief Irish pointed out, I've been with the department. This is my 25th year with ISD right now, and the great opportunity to serve in this role here. When Chief Irish asked me would I consider this role, I can honestly say that I was absolutely floored, and I am honored, and I truly am flattered to be considered in this role in the first place. I've been here now, I believe it's 6 weeks in this particular role, and have a great rapport with my colleagues that I work here with. And once again, thank you for your time. So I'd like to get right back into it. So basically, a little bit of background on our building division. We have 25 inspector positions here in ISD. 23 are currently filled. We're assigned by wards, different wards in the city. We have what's the great, rather than rotating, we have individuals that are familiar with each particular job through its phases, and as different phases come up, and we also have the ability to implement. We can shift individuals on a needed basis, and the floor here, the individuals very, very readily step up to the plate when we do need help in a different area for a certain period of time. Very, very cooperative staff here on the floor. And the inspectors are responsible basically reviewing project scope on short forms. Short forms are your everyday repairs. And we can honestly say during COVID, when back through March and April, when both large and small jobs, a lot of say big projects, they were in very precarious positions. We're ready to lose pilings, driving sheet pilings. But ISD we took the forefront, and we had implemented COVID protocol along with the larger construction companies. If this didn't happen in this particular time, we're going to lose. Not only it's not about the money, but it's life safety. And that's our focus here in ISD overall, but also quality of life, but life safety needs, and all the way down to the roof's leaking. We work with them, and we can honestly say, rather than being at a standstill during this whole early on in COVID, we made things happen. We enabled the city to move along in a very, very, very cautionary manner, but we did get it done. The inspectors that are assigned to the different wards, they respond to constituent complaints also. And a lot of times, I'm sure, with members of the council, that there's two sides to every story. So it's not a cut and dry. And the staff here on board, as we have a lot of new staff, and as it's great to watch people. Okay, something comes in, it has to be deciphered. It's not cut and dry. A lot of times there's two sides to every story. So that's that's part of ISD's work also. It's not just a matter of going out and rubber stamping anything that comes down the road. There's two sides, and let's take a look at the backstory. Our wonderful staff, and I can honestly say for the administrative staff, they get you the background, they get you, and then you can take a look what's going on down below the scenes. And right now, permit applications, they're issuing back to 19 volume after obviously a huge dip in April and May of last year, huge, when basically the country was at a standstill, the state was at a standstill, the world was at a standstill. We're getting right back up to volume here in the city. 3,000 long forms, 33,000 total permits issued in 2020 versus 3.7 long forms, 47,000 total in 2019. We're inching back up. We're not inching, we're making great strides actually. Here over this COVID, one of the great things that came out of the COVID protocol basically, or the COVID pandemic, you know, I can't say one of the great things, but one positive thing that did come out, that digital implementation into the system itself, into the course of doing business here, become much more efficient. You know, with our IT staff, you know, I cannot say enough about them, that the changes that were brought about in ISD as far as permitting process has been absolutely incredible. It's a time saver, it's a money saver, it's a manpower saver, woman power saver. It's just spectacular what our IT has done. After hours work process, when it's totally on online system right now, when individuals have to leave a job site. So if they needed somebody this evening, you know, they're running short on the schedule, they have to get this into place, get these forms in place before the concrete's coming tomorrow. And big pours, small pours didn't make a difference. It's done in a matter of 5 minutes now, rather than an individual leaving a job site, coming in, filling out paperwork, and then waiting for approvals. It's a matter of 5 minutes. And once again, that's a credit to our IT staff here at ISD implementing this system. Demolition process requires this demolition permit. And, you know, there's protocol, that standard protocol has to be followed. Obviously, you know, historical protocol, and there's different situations where, you know, we can't let you just take that building down, and it's not going to happen. Try and work with different entities throughout the city, just to save particular buildings, and unless obviously, you know, unsafe and dangerous situation. But I can honestly say, you know, in 25 years here in this department, that we have come a long way, and much more user friendly and much more efficient than I have ever seen in my life. And once again, that's a credit to Chief Irish and his you know, leadership role in the IT staff and the support staff that we have here right now. And thank you very, very much for entertaining us today. Thank you.
Counselor, good morning. I'm going to jump right in here and give some more detail and context in some of our operational things. I think as Commissioner Leiter alluded to in our overview of the building division, a lot of what we're presenting today it involves the impact to both our services and our operations due to COVID. So it's in addition to an increased amount of work sort of on the enforcement side, we have had to drastically change how we do business over the past year, much of which has lent itself to sort of efficiencies and improvements that we've been able to make that we will continue to carry forward. And you know, one of the most important parts of ISD, and one that probably touches constituents across the city most significantly, is the Zoning Board of Appeal. We know over the past few years we've gone through a series of operational and policy changes to improve the work of the board. We've been very steady in sort of implementing changes outlined in our executive order that was signed in February of 2019. But one of the big things that sort of came out of COVID was our switch to fully online and remote hearings, which I know the council has also dealt with, which presented some significant challenges for us, considering the volume of appeal cases that go through the department every year. We generally see, and 2020 was no change in sort of volume. It's about 800 appeals go through the ZBA process every year, and managing that sort of caseload while we took a pause on holding hearings, but also moving to sort of this fully digital format was a challenge for us. We implemented some extra hearings over the course of the past year to try to catch up to sort of where we were operationally speaking. And I think the ability for the board to have the public participate without having to come into City Hall is definitely something that we've valued and we'd look to continue doing in some format moving forward. I mentioned the executive order, and I know that's something of importance to the council, particularly on sort of the operational improvements that we've needed to make to the board. I can happily say that of all of the measures outlined in the executive order have either been implemented fully or are in the process of implementation. I think the last remaining item on the list is our electronic plans adoption, which when we switched to sort of a remote operational system here, our electronic plan submission to the department for permit applications went from maybe 20% of all applications to close to 100% of applications are now being submitted with electronic plans. Adopting a software solution to be able to manage that and review those projects is in process, and we can happily speak to that in more detail on how that's going. But we think things are going well with the board. We know that there are additional opportunities for us to improve the way we interact with the public during board hearings, and we would continue to work closely with the council on making sure that those improvements in terms of access and accessibility for our constituents is really of utmost importance. So in FY21, ISD was funded for some additional positions to support the operations of the board. This was a paralegal and 2 head clerk positions to provide additional capacity to board operations. We have filled 2 of those positions and are in the process of hiring for the 3rd. So we think we will continue to see sort of some of these just operational improvements moving forward once we have everybody fully staffed. But I think that investment that was made last year that the council supported has really helped us out so far. I think could move over to health, which is probably the division that was empowered with the most amount of additional work over the past year as the enforcement agency for all of the city and state COVID orders. While we saw some activity change in terms of restaurants being open, our health inspectors were called out to respond to and investigate COVID-related complaints. So both exposures as well as staff, employee, patron cases, in addition to all of the other measures, right? So not just restaurants, but essential businesses operating, maintaining safe and healthy environments, both for business owners and their employees, as well as customers. And I think the additional work that our health division has done probably doubled the number of inspections that they typically do in a year, just due to the COVID activity. In addition to sort of the COVID-related operations, we have some additional regulatory oversight that the council is given us as far as permitting residential kitchens. And we're happy to say we're very close to implementing our permit process so that we can get folks up and running, because I know there's great interest across the city, and hopefully before the end of this month, we'll be able to accept and issue permits for those. As far as our funding for the health division goes, in FY21, our budget included additional inspectors for the health department. We currently have 18 health inspectors with a few vacancies. We have done some very aggressive recruitment and hiring across the entire department, but particularly for the health division because it's one of our most important regulatory divisions here. Those positions are being filled as we speak. One of them is already filled, and we are hopeful to bring on that second inspector for the end of this fiscal year. We'll move on to housing. Again, the common theme through the whole presentation is the impact that COVID has had on ISD and how we operate. One of the biggest challenges that we've had over the past year is conducting our proactive rental inspections. So as the council is aware, we require all rental housing units in the city, long-term rental housing units in the city, to register with ISD and be inspected on an ongoing basis. And we generally try to do 12 to 14,000 of those inspections annually. What we saw over the past year is a lot of apprehension from tenants to have in-person inspections. We've sort of modified our operations to be able to do some virtual type inspections, and I think that's something that we'd love to continue working on moving forward post-pandemic as a way to be able to get access and deliver our services sort of more widely and efficiently. We initially select a number of units that are supposed to be inspected every year. For 2020, since many of those inspections hadn't happened, we've rescheduled those for this year. So we're in the field and we're doing those. I will say there continues to be some apprehension from tenants on allowing staff into their properties for these inspections, and we're trying to work directly with those folks to make sure that we complete these inspections, ensure that they have a safe and healthy place to live, at the same time recognizing sort of the current state of pandemic that we're in. The other major piece of our housing division is enforcement of the short-term rental ordinance. As we've fully implemented the regulatory oversight of short-term rentals, we've adopted a more our process for taking down illegal listings and investigating illegal operators has benefited greatly from sort of the technology aspect of short-term rentals. We work pretty closely with the platforms on identifying problematic listings. We issue takedown requests that are responded to within a month, and we've really sort of stepped up on making that a more automated process. So in fiscal 21, I think we're in excess of 3,000 listings that we've requested the platforms to take down. All of that happens, within 30 days, which is great. We respond to their activity reports that they send in monthly. We've stepped up our enforcement as far as issuing violations and fines. We currently have issued in excess of $160,000 worth of violations, many of which are appealed. most of which are upheld. I think we have several that are in housing court, some of the bigger fines right now, but we are moving forward with those processes. We've collected a large amount of those fines, but we're still ongoing. One of the great things that happened over the past year is the adoption of the short-term rental complaint form in 311. So there's a dedicated case type now, both on the 311 app as well as in the online website, and when you call in to report problematic short-term rental listings. Part of our overall sort of technology improvement that we've done across the entire department is the adoption of the City Worker platform. So those complaints go directly to our inspectors, and they can be investigated and responded to in real time. The great thing about having a dedicated case type for that, sort of a better tracking and monitoring of the situation there. I think we're up to just over 12 or 1,300 registered short-term rentals in the city. Another part of work that we're in the process of implementing within our housing division is the recently adopted Condo conversion ordinance and the Housing Stability Notification Act, both of which require some enforcement measures from our housing division. I think the two ordinances there are a good example of sort of interagency collaboration. So it's not just ISD's responsibility to monitor and enforce these. We're working very closely with the Office of Housing Stability and the Fair Housing and Equity Office on monitoring and enforcing those new regulations. And I think we'll see a lot of activity of those coming in fiscal 22. Can move on to the environment division. So our environmental health division oversees our monitoring and enforcement primarily for rodents. And I know that's of importance to the council as you hear concerns from your constituents about how the city is responding to rodent activity. In 2020, we saw a shift in rodent activity across the city from primarily commercial districts to residential neighborhoods, which is sort of a combination of several things. One being business districts being closed due to COVID, but also and the food source, essentially a lot of people eating takeout. The volume of trash in the residential trash increased over the past year, and with that, the food source has moved. So we've seen rodent activity pop up in residential parts of the city that may not have seen that type of activity in the past. I think part of it is also a lot of people at home more during the day, so they're able to notice the activity. I think in the past year, we've tried to be both responsive to complaints, but also better about proactive baiting and trapping. So our inspectors start out at, we have 3 shifts for environmental health inspectors, starting out at 4 o'clock in the morning. They're out baiting our public alleys, our sewer systems, and monitoring rodent activity in and around construction sites. I would say we've nearly doubled the amount of proactive baiting in the past year that we've done in years past, primarily as a way to sort of control a problem before it becomes a problem. But a large part of the work that we've been doing over the past year, both in the environment department division as well as across the department, is educational outreach to our constituents. So we want to provide information to residents on what they can do as far as rodent control measures go, and how we can work with residents. I think Councilor Braden's district, for example, there's been a lot of activity there. We've worked very closely with some of the civic and neighborhood groups in the area to get information out to residents, particularly in some hotspot areas. I think we had one resident who distributed a few thousand flyers from ISD for us and asked if we could give some more that they could give out. So I think that sort of the collaboration between ISD and the public has been really important in sort of managing and mitigating the rodent activity across the city. And as we continue to see our business districts come back to life over the next few months, we may see activity change, but we're ready, willing, and able to respond to those. I think we held a very informative workshop with a public workshop in October of last year. I think we're going to continue to do those moving forward. We get great feedback from residents, and we do a lot of proactive work, but we're really reliant on our 700,000 plus residents to help us out in identifying where we need to do more. So that's something that we'll continue to do in the coming year. Our last regulatory division that I wanted to give some oversight to is our weights and measures division. So it's a little known division, but really important work comes out of weights and measures. Two significant pieces of oversight that weights and measures has are enforcement of the plastic bag ordinance. During the past year, we've been inspecting anywhere from 20 to 60 locations a week to ensure that they're abiding by the ordinance. There was a pause in the plastic bag ban requirements handed down by the state for a period of time during COVID. That pause has been lifted, and we are back out in enforcement mode there. And the newest piece of enforcement authority that our weights and measures division has is with the Safe Sharp Disposal Program ordinance. We are in the process of implementing that now, but that will require, and thanks to the council for bringing this to us, really, we're working very closely with the Boston Public Health Commission to make sure that pharmacies in the city that provide sharps have a safe disposal program implemented so that folks across the city have a place to dispose of their sharps. And that's something that we will be requiring plans to be submitted to our Public Health Commission colleagues. And then on the enforcement side is in our weights and measures division. So that's sort of the general update on our regulatory divisions. Another really important division that ISD has is our Constituent Services division. During COVID and our switch to fully remote operations for much of our administrative work, call volume and email volume increased significantly, both in terms of just the regular work as well as complaints. I think we handled about 130,000 calls to ISD's call center last year, which is a separate call center from the main 311 line, which we also received referrals from. But I would say our call volume exploded over the past year. Our constituent services liaisons and our call center reps we moved our call centers fully remote, which was a challenge in the beginning to make sure that our staff were able to answer and respond to calls outside of the office. One thing that we did identify over the past year is sort of the significant volume of calls that we get to our call center that are housing related. So these are complaints about housing conditions, requests for inspections, and response for sort of the unsanitary living condition side of our world. We set up a dedicated housing call center in, I think, the end of the summer that handles all of our incoming housing requests. So now that we have sort of these two call center operations, we've been able to be better about and more efficient about responding to the housing requests because they are going directly to the housing division and leaving our lines open at the main call center for other operations. We have 4 call center reps, and we're hiring for 2 additional ones. The other part of our constituent services division, which I'm sure many of the counselors have been involved with, is our investigation and enforcement team. So there's sort of a specialized team that handles our special operations is a generic term for it that doesn't really give you insight into what they do, but they handle our hoarding cases, our cases of living conditions that need sort of more case managed approach. It's comprised of our call center, our constituent services division, as well as building, housing, the fire department, the public health commission, the police department. We sort of coordinate our response to special cases, and much of what the I&E team has been doing over the past year is COVID-related enforcement, particularly on gatherings. Over the fall and winter, our I&E team responded to just about 100 specific complaints related to parties and gatherings in violation of COVID orders, and we responded to those with a variety of measures, from issuing warning notices to formal violations to fines. And our I&E team, the really specialized focus of them, it's been very helpful to have them, and we're looking to continue their operations and sort of expand their capabilities moving forward, which is part of our budget proposal before you. So I think.
Chris, you want me to jump in on the departmental goals?
Please.
Yeah. So we're just going to touch briefly. A lot of these items are things that Chris has already talked about in reflecting on the work of our divisions, but we just want to touch on a few of the central departmental goals, how we've achieved this in fiscal year 21, and just looking ahead to fiscal year 22, how we're planning on continuing to bring this forward in our work. First, I just want to stress our efforts around education and outreach. ISD's central mission is focused on safety. So one of the main ways we try to do this is trying to inform constituents, inform homeowners, renters, both about the services that we offer, but also what they can do to maintain safety in the community as well. Some ways that we've done this in the past year, and we've, working in a remote virtual space, it's given us a chance to experiment with some things that we want to pull forward, but also with reopening, there's ways we can be back out in the fields, leveraging our constituent services staff and collaborating with colleagues at ONS and other divisions to get the word out. Just 3 key examples. We just closed out in May, Building Safety Month. This was a series of initiatives. We did a communication push through our social media channels and emails out to our contacts. We did a walkthrough with all ISD inspectors, where we did a full field day where they went out into the wards with teams of their colleagues from across divisions to do a visual inspection on buildings. In this inspection, we were looking for safety issues, so facades, fire escapes, etc. And again, it was with an eye on education and informing property owners. So we were able to leave door knockers and had a follow-up webinar where we talked about how property owners could maintain their properties to avoid costly issues or safety issues. And we also just informed the community that if they are seeing something that's an issue, to report that through 311. We're here to help with that. A few other examples are we did a zoning 101 workshop. This is something that we've started and plan to continue in the future. We understand that the permitting process can be confusing for somebody who's new to this. So we're just trying to make it as easy to access that information as possible. So in these workshops, our planning and zoning team and our building officials talk through what that process looks like. And then finally, we did a tools of the trade workshop with ONS, I believe, for economic development back in early COVID days when we were rapidly switching to remote work. This was meant as just a way to inform the construction community how they could continue to work with us as quickly as possible in this new way. Also, just want to touch briefly on our plans to expand our use of non-criminal disposition going forward to the next fiscal year. Chris, as he talked through our divisions, talked through many of the ordinances that we provide oversight onto. The vast majority of these fall under 40U, and there's some opportunity for us to streamline our administration and follow up on these to ensure compliance. Because of course we want to stress education and outreach, but if we are not making progress on an issue, we do want to be able to leverage fines or other tools at our disposal to make sure that we are closing out problem issues. And then finally, we as a department have been doing a lot of work around technology improvements. This is something that started prior to COVID, that is certainly something that has been helpful as we work in a remote world. Again, we've been able to leverage it while we're serving customers not in person, but we're hoping to pull some of these learnings forward as we do reopen. All of our use of technology is with a focus of really improving customer service and improving our internal staff experience, making sure we're as efficient as possible here. A few highlights from what we were able to deliver in fiscal year 21. And Chris touched on many of these. We adopted city workers. So we as a department are now leveraging the same tool set to respond to 311 cases as our colleagues in other departments. This allows us just to be more transparent in our work and in terms of pushing out information on case closure and what's happening out to the original requester. We also were able to introduce a short-term rental 311 complaint type, which we were excited to be able to make available. That was something that was asked for in the community early on in that ordinance. We were also able to start taking e-check payments, which particularly as we went to work in a remote world, allowed us to avoid taking mailed-in checks for the vast majority of our business and allowed people to continue obtaining permits and services as quickly as possible. We equipped staff for remote work. We pushed out laptops, tablets, and cell phones that allowed us to be flexible in terms of staff in the building. And we launched both the Zoning Board of Appeal. We now take online applications and payments, and we launched a public-facing project tracker. Moving forward, we plan to continue this work in fiscal year 22. Chris mentioned e-plans. This has been a project that has been we've been pushing for a while. We are going to be kicking that off this summer, and we'll have that out in the world in the near future. And we're also bringing additional applications online. So we're looking to expand online services to some of the areas that we don't currently have. And with that, thank you for letting us run through this summary. We hope we were able to address some of the questions that came up in the working session. Before opening to questions, I just want to give Commissioner and Chief anything you want to add.
Thank you very, very much, Kelly. And once again, thank you very much for the help in the past year. This, I have to say, members of the council, this is probably the key individual as far as our IT implementation went here. This is the young lady that made it happen this year. Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you to the entire team. Some of the things that they mentioned may seem mundane and not glamorous, but they're actually quite impactful. And I think the public will see the benefits of these improvements that they're focused on. And they can literally talk for another hour about work that they're doing, but we're not going to do that. Certainly, I'm sure there's maybe questions that you all may have beyond what was discussed in the working session. So we'll leave it there. And, thank you for your time and thank you to the ISD team.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief Irish and Commissioner Leiter and Kelly and Chris for that presentation and for addressing many of our questions that, as you said, we sent ahead. So appreciate that. I'm going to jump into councillor questions. As usual, I'll reserve mine to the end. I do want to note that we were joined in the meantime by our President Pro Tem, Councillor Matt O'Malley, District 6, and also by Councillor Michael Flaherty at large. I'm going to jump. The first one will be Councillor Flynn. I'll send the order out to councillors. I'm just going to say to councillors, I've been a little lax about timekeeping lately, and I'm going to go back to being a little bit less lax because we have 2 hearings today. So I will raise my gavel after 5 minutes and really ask you to be done after 7. And if you've got second round questions, that's great, but just save them for the second round because we've been running into kind of 10, 11, 12-minute first rounds, and it's a little tough. So with that word of warning, I will go to Councillor Flynn. Councillor Flynn, you have the floor.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Councilor Bach. And I want to say thank you to Commissioner Leiter and Chief Dion Irish and Chris English and Kelly Mackey as well, and the ISD team. They're very professional and they're hardworking, and especially over the last year, they did an exceptional job for the residents of Boston. I think this is one of the most important budget meetings we can possibly have because this is nuts and bolts of city government, and if we don't get this right, we're not going to get anything right. My number one issue was always, first, as I mentioned, the great respect for ISD. I think we give ISD too much work and to do without the necessary resources. We're going to give them more duties now to investigate people's homes that want to sell some type of food. The city council, when we do that, the city council has a responsibility to advocate fiercely for more funding if we want to add these programs. But I'm not blaming ISD, but I think you guys are overworked and underpaid, and you do a tremendous job. But I guess Commissioner Leiden or Chief Irish, are we adding more inspectors because of the amount of work that the city council now has put on your plate?
If I may, Councilor, thank you for addressing. I think that the city council has put the work on our plate that is adequate. I think we actually operate in a much more efficient manner now than we ever have. Once again, it's a blessing that came out of COVID, and I think that at staffing level, I believe that we're adequate, and I think that the efficiency, once moving forward into fiscal year 22, the efficiency of our automated systems is going to be, it's key moving forward and operate a much more efficient basis rather than rather than staffing more at higher levels, in my opinion. That's my take on that, Councilor Flynn.
Yeah, thank you. But are we adding in this budget, the mayor's budget, are we putting on more inspectors?
No, not that. I think if we reach the current, what we have out, the recs we have out right now, I think we should be at an adequate level, very adequate level. Once again, efficiency is key in the staffing that we do have. And I think that we will be at an adequate level.
So let me add to that. In FY21, the council, you all approved an additional 2 health inspectors. Given the freeze that we had during the pandemic, we're currently, I think, close to onboarding those 2 additional inspectors. So we are adding 2 inspectors. I hear you loud and clear about the additional responsibilities with respect to the retail kitchen from residential kitchens. But we want to be able just to gauge what volume we're going to be seeing as we start to rule that out. And then we can certainly make adjustments during the budget year or for the next fiscal year as needed to ensure that we have sufficient resources.
The other issue is I focus a lot on is these short-term rentals, these outrageous house parties that I see in my neighborhood in South Boston, after hours construction, pest and rodent control. I had hearings on all of these issues, pest and rodent control in the South End and in Chinatown. I've been on walking tours with Public Works and Inspectional Services on pest control issues. Are we adding, but we're not adding more inspectors for pest control, for Airbnb, short-term rentals, after-hour work, weekend work?
Let me address that, please, Councilor Flynn. When actually just this morning, I was in a discussion regarding pest control, and I think that there's another way to take a look at it. It's not a matter of staffing. It's just a matter of implementing more, or asking the developers more solutions, more engineered solutions to the activity, to rodent activity in particular. And that's what just this morning, touching bases with this, and that's what we intend to implement. Once again, we're going to have a different set of guidelines, a different set of rules as far as, particularly in the neighborhoods you just mentioned, also Austin, Brighton. So that's being addressed as we speak. We're definitely going to reach out to those developers, and we're going to ask them to step up to the plate with a little more proactive activity as far as rodent control goes.
Then another issue I focus on, Commissioner and Chief, is illegal dumping of garbage. I see a lot of construction companies fire their garbage in my district, especially in Chinatown, as if that's a dumping ground. And I think I need more help in tracking down these contractors, the construction guys that are doing this. I chased one guy going down Beach Street for about a half a mile last year, and I couldn't catch him. I wanted to get his license plate, but my neighborhood's in Chinatown's a dumping ground for these construction guys, and I've had it with these guys, and I need some help on dealing with these quality of life issues.
Understandably, and I can also say, our code team, they're very early and they're very, very active, and they are very detective oriented. They will go through and they will find. It's I would say 90% of the time they're gonna find who the perpetrators are in these, and then there's heavy fines, and also they're on the board for next time around. If you know what I mean. That's it's a very serious situation, very serious violation, and we take that as such, and we have no room for that here at ISD.
No, yeah.
Just to add, one of the things we did this past year was add an environmental health inspector to our on-call rotation. So up until very recently, we had building, housing, electrical, plumbing, a whole list of inspectors that are on call 24 hours a day. We recently added an environmental health inspector to that on-call rotation. So we do have somebody available 24 hours a day to respond to complaints as they come in, particularly after hours and on the weekends.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Dion. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Councilor Block. I have no further questions. Just want to say thank you to the ISD team. They're professional, they're hardworking, and they care about the residents of Boston. Thank you, Councilor Block.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Campbell?
Thank you, Councilor Bach, and I apologize, I'm off video because I'm in my car while I go out to a flag raising out here on the plaza. So I'm trying to manage this from a laptop and a phone safely. So I am parked, that's for sure. But thank you all for the work that you do. And Sean, as I told you, just really great to see you in that role. You're responsive, you work really hard. So congratulations on the position. Dion, thanks for everything you continue to do, of course, as well. Really appreciate you and the entire team, and frankly, the men and women at ISD who went above and beyond in the midst of COVID. A lot of regulations changed rules and requirements, particularly around construction. We had illegal construction because people didn't want to stop constructing at the beginning of COVID, and folks were really responsive to the concerns from residents around enforcing some of these measures. So thank you to you and your team. And Kelly and Chris, thank you for your presentation as well. I just have maybe just a few questions. I also want to give a shout out and a thank you to Flavio from me, Dustin on my team as well, because he's been extremely responsive to a whole host of cases we're bringing his way. So thank you to him as well. One, obviously with the virtual zoning hearings, we've been hearing a lot of great feedback around just the new investments in technology, being able to pay online, not having to show up at 1010 Mass Ave, streamlining processes. People want to see that go forward. Virtual zoning board hearings, it's been a mixed response. And I think, Chris, you hinted at that, ways to improve for sure. But one of the things that residents have asked us to consider is, could the department create a designated helpline for residents having difficulty accessing the WebEx platform or through a phone call or something during the meeting? Because we know there's an ambassador position that was originally intended for this, but is now required to cover much of the operations of the virtual meeting itself. So if there could be a designated helpline, that's one question. And then maybe a meeting facilitator who coordinates the testimony while allowing the ambassador to be accessible for questions throughout the meeting. So just, I think, further supports. Wondering if you guys are hearing some of that too. We want to lift that up as ways to help. And then the second is around the Zoning Board of Appeal. Folks have asked that in order to have a better understanding of the projects that are going to be proposed in their neighborhoods and more time to engage the ZBA before the hearing, if we've explored posting at the same time that things are posted in the Herald, or if we've explored linking to the agenda by clicking the hearing date on the ZBA webpage. Something I think Cambridge does, where you can click and get access to the agenda, various relevant documents related to the proposal, documents such as letters of support, opposition, BPDA review, just so it's visible to the public and easier to assess. Those are my two sets of questions. Thank you.
Counselor, great questions and great points. We definitely hear it loud and clear about the need to sort of improve the ZBA process for the public as far as participation and testimony goes. You know, the challenges of virtual hearings and opportunities with virtual hearings have really sort of created sort of an ongoing list of improvements that we'd love to make and that we're looking to make. I think one thing that we've tried to push over the past few months is really sort of upfront written testimony to be submitted to the board, so that we can collect those and make sure that the board has those in, the board members have them in the case packets in advance of the hearings. So that, you know, in the event that, you know, someone has difficulty logging in or providing testimony in person, that written testimony is super important for us. And the written testimony in advance sort of gives the board an opportunity to have the time to consider the comments of the public prior to rendering the decision on a case. We have a dedicated email list for submission of testimony, but I think your ideas about sort of having the operationally staffed hearings to sort of facilitate that testimony and address technology issues in real time and lend support to our ambassador are great ideas. And I think that's something we definitely could move forward with implementing for both hearing days and sort of just as part of the general operations of the board. I think we brought on, we had 3 new positions funded in FY21 dedicated to the Board of Appeal. And I think some of that extra capacity, it'll certainly be beneficial to have the clerks and the paralegal on board for those hearings to sort of manage that operational procedures, I guess to say, and sort of providing more information and better information that's accessible to the public is, I think, a theme of all of the work that we've been trying to do over the past year and are looking to do in the coming fiscal year. And we certainly take those suggestions to heart and ways to make sure that the public, the CBA, as I said it before, is probably one of the most significant operations of city government as far as its impact on our residents. And we want to make sure it's, accessible and open to everyone in a variety of manners. So absolutely, we'll look to sort of adopt those and move them forward.
The only thing I want to add there is, like Chris said, that is a goal of ours to make that information as available and as transparent and understandable to constituents as possible. We did launch the ZBA project tracker this past year. It is a first round version that we will be continuing to improve upon over time, especially in terms of incorporating other documents for the project and just other information on the project, again, to make that as accessible as possible for folks who are trying to see what's going on in their neighborhood.
Great. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Councillor Campbell. Next up is Councillor Braden. Councillor Braden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank everyone from ISD for the incredible work that you do. It all keeps going. I think it impacts so many aspects of our lives in the city, and I really appreciate all the great work that you do and how responsive you are when we call, when our office calls. Your office is very responsive to constituent concerns. I had a couple of questions. Where are they? Rodent control is always an issue. I just wonder, is there anything is there anything more that we can do in terms of requiring landlords to provide adequate refuse canisters for trash cans for trash, because that's one of the big issues. And also, what is the most best way to go about requesting a building inspection for rental properties? We have a lot of rentals in our neighborhood in Alston Brighton. We have a huge number of absentee landlords, large landlords who do not keep up their properties, and it is a challenge to get into buildings. And what's the best way to make those referrals, and what are the challenges that you face when coming up against getting access to rental properties for an inspection? I also want to thank you for your short-term rental intervention. We've managed to call in a few cases of flagrant ignoring of the regulations. So thank you for intervening in those cases. Just out of interest, how many short-term rental cases did you? I don't know if you have this at your fingertips, but just Alston Brighton, we have a lot of large buildings with absentee landlords, and I just wondered if you have any numbers, any hard data on the numbers by district for short-term rental violations. And those are really the three questions I have for right now.
Take them in reverse order here. As far as the short-term rental cases by ward or district, we're happy to follow up with you after the hearing with those numbers. We don't have them right on hand, but we can certainly provide those after we conclude the hearing.
Fine, thank you.
As far as gaining access to properties, you mentioned the challenges in gaining access. We do require permission to enter properties, whether it's a tenant or a property owner. and we do see some challenges there in our response to complaints or requests for investigations. I think we make several attempts to gain access to a property to investigate a potential violation. We have the ability to issue a violation to have a court provide us with access to a property in cases. So that is an avenue that we can use. But I think as far as the reporting, the best way to go about it is 311. All of our work really does involve being responsive to complaints, but the 311 system is great as far as our tracking purposes and our ability to keep residents and constituents updated on our response. We recognize some of our housing cases can take a long time to resolve, whether that's because of access or because of a court process. But our ability to keep residents informed of the status of their complaint, the adoption of City Worker and our responsive process through 311 is the best way to go about doing things. It gives us the ability to report out stats and things like that. So I would say I would recommend continuing to use those systems moving forward.
Good. And then the rodent issue, I'm actually alarmed at the amount of rodents that I'm seeing in places that I didn't see rodents before. In terms of, I really applaud the public information campaign but we would be happy, our office would be happy to help disseminate that and get it out into the neighborhoods, or even if there's an electronic version, we'd be happy to put it on our newsletter and get it out. Because I think it's an all hands on deck effort. I don't think we're going to do it by just baiting and trapping is not going to crack it. We need to do a lot of preventative work as well. So our office are very happy to help with that, disseminating that information. And really, I think that's all I have for the moment. Oh, the other thing, just access to the ZBA. I was wondering, is there any way that we can track, historically track, projects and then the variances that different projects received? Is it possible within your system to do that?
If I may, Councilor Braden, thank you very much. It is absolutely possible. We do have document room. The keeper of the records is Bridget Kenny White, and it has all the information that any kind of information you need. Email her, and she will readily have that available for you instantaneously, almost.
And it's digitally accessible for her. I don't want somebody to have to run through stacks to find it. It's digitally accessible.
Yes, it is, Council.
We've done a huge campaign to digitize our historic records and make them publicly searchable. So there is a platform that constituents can use to access all of our historic documents. But specifically for the ZBA cases, one of the things we're looking to continue to improve is our case tracker. So currently that has information about projects, hearing dates, community process, and sort of a description of the work there. What we're looking to expand on is linking our decisions, linking the notices to that so that people can stay updated with those measures. I think that's definitely a fiscal 22 project, is sort of expanding the amount of information that is connected to our tracker. And we're certainly, any suggestions, any and all suggestions for how to make that better, we certainly welcome.
Thank you. And in terms of the platform where you can research the historic data, do you have a link to that, or how do you access it?
It's linked right on our website. The platform is Scaris. You could search by address, by document type, and it goes for the entire building jacket of of a property. So we have records dating back to the 1900s that are digitized and linked there.
Wow, very good. So it's Ceres, S-C-E-R.
SCERIS, and we're happy to
Councilor
send
Braden,
the
I'm
link.
sure we can get the link sent over. I think that's probably
Very
more.
good. That's it. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
So much. Yeah, I actually use that. It's very cool. The historic scanning in. I found a handwritten permit from my family's house going back 100 years, and it was a neat thing. And I do just want to note from earlier, Councilor Campbell froze up at the end, so she wasn't able to thank you all, but she was on for the duration and heard everything that you said. So
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Council.
all right, now going to Councilor Mejia, and then it will be President O'Malley. Councilor Mejia.
Yes, so really excited. You guys know how much I love ISD, so happy to be here with you all today. I'm just curious, I'm gonna talk a little bit about residential kitchens, and I'm curious about how the budget reflects how we're going to monitor residential kitchens. I know, Chris, you said that we were very close to implementing the permit process, but the ordinance stated that the law should go into effect within 30 days, and we're still waiting for the zoning amendment to go through. Can you talk a little bit about what the delay has been on the administration end and what is being done so that in the future that we ensure that policies that are submitted by the council is passed within the timeline? We've been getting a lot of calls from folks who are eager to start, and it just seems like we're in a holding pattern. So I just would love to hear what that looks like. And then can you talk a little bit more about ISD's role in monitoring and inspecting recipients of outdoor dining licenses? Did it have an impact on staffing or funding of any kind? And then one of the stated FY22 goals of ISD is to increase the use of fines to encourage compliance via policy systems and improvement processes. In the past, you have found that increasing fines lead to more compliance. Is there a correlation between those two? And how are we going to deal with particularly problematic properties that either refuse to pay or continue to not comply even further, even after they've been fined or whatever have you?
I'll take them in reverse order. The increased use of fines, much of our enforcement authority is remedial, right? So we want to make sure that problems, whether it's a building or a housing issue, is remediated in a timely manner. So we want the problem to be fixed. What we are looking to do sort of as part of our ongoing efforts to increase compliance is use fines as a way to ensure that problems are being addressed and given the same weight that they deserve. So, issuing fines and using the non-criminal disposition process allows us to issue fines, require collection, and if uncollected after a certain period of time, we can move forward with a lien process and attach those fines to the property as a lien. So collect them through that method. As far as outdoor dining goes, certainly the outdoor dining program last year and this year has added a bit of work to our health division. Our health division conducts inspections of all restaurants in the city, and that's really the bulk of their work. Much of the outdoor dining work that we've been doing is inspections related to compliance with COVID measures, but also sort of response to complaints. I think we did approximately 10,000 food service establishment inspections last year. It generally on par with years past. I think the work changed a little bit due to restaurants closing or temporarily suspending operations, and allowed us to sort of focus on ones that sort of expanded their operations into outdoor dining. on residential kitchens, and I know this super important to you, Counselor, and I think, as I said, I think the last time we spoke, this is, a really exciting ordinance and regulatory system that we're happy to provide sort of the oversight into this opportunity for residents. We're very close to being able to sort of issue our first permits for this. And I think we hope to have those ready to roll in the next few weeks. The systems are in place. We are accepting inquiries from residents and working with folks. There is a lot of work that needs to be done on the front end for the operator, as far as becoming ServSafe certified, allergen safety awareness trained, and that work needs to be done prior to us being able to issue a permit. So we're working with folks to review their plans and make sure that everything is in order, so that we can get folks operational. As I said, in the coming weeks, we should be able to have that rolled out fully.
Councilor Mejia, do you have further questions? Just want to check for a second. Chris, just while I check if Councilor Mejia is coming back. So basically, a bunch of those things have to happen for a lot of these operators before you guys are going to get to your ISD frame. And are you guys serving a kind of clarifying role?
Yep. So we're sort of doing a one-on-one, I don't want to say hand-holding, but providing guidance on how operators can meet the minimum requirements of the ordinance and how to safely operate these moving forward. Once we do issue a permit, we require sort of this application up front and making sure that the operators are properly certified and trained. And then it requires an inspection before we issue the operational permit. So it would make sure that folks are aware of sort of what the equipment and sanitary requirements of operating one of these are. We do get a lot of inquiries about the type of food that can be produced in a residential kitchen. I think the type of food is limited, right? So this is a sanitary code requirement that they have to be shelf-stable foods, jams, jellies, hot sauces, breads, that type of thing. Nothing that needs to be temperature controlled. And I think providing that guidance to potential applicants has been helpful for them, just to give a better understanding of what these operations actually look like. And then, once a permit's issued, we're sort of in response mode in case we get a complaint. We'll conduct inspections over the course of the year.
Got it. Great. All right. Well, if Councilor Mejia is able to reconnect, she'll have a second round of questions. But now I'm going to go to Councilor O'Malley, and then it will be Councilor Edwards. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Chris, Kelly, Dion, thank you for your great partnership. Commissioner Leiter, congratulations on this well-deserved promotion. I can speak, it's funny, I will often get myself in trouble by thanking members of the relevant departments at the hearing. Sean, someone I thank every year, and I've really appreciated his great partnership and just delighted that he's now in this position. I can also speak to the incredible Leiden family, Jamaica Plain royalty. So we're delighted to see you in this position, and obviously congratulations, Chief Irish, as well. I will apologize for omitting anyone inadvertently, but Brian Ronan, Colleen Kennedy, Keith Barry, Jim Kennedy, Stephanie Hayes, so many great partners to each and every one of us. We know how challenging this year has been to all of us. And, I've been so impressed with the way that ISD has not missed a beat. It is safe to say, in my opinion, that ISD is in a better position now operationally than it has been in my entire time on this body, which is going back 11 years. So it's a credit to all of you and the men and women of Boston ISD. Couple of quick questions. I think line item, and this may be for you, Kelly, or whomever can jump in, 54,900. It's about $1 million facilities increased cost. And you had gone into a little level more detail on your answers that you provided us, but I was just wondering if I could have even more clarity than that.
Sure, 54,900, the current charges. Is that the correct?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. Yes, yes. So 54,900 other current charges, and it's about a $999,000 recommended allocation.
Yes, so that covers both our annual software as well as our lease. So the lease is all just handled by budget with property management. So that's just an increase on the lease. And then the software increase is related to our implementation of e-plans. We'll have an ongoing subscription rate moving forward to support the e-plans work. And just on the software side, we are recognizing that savings. With paper plans, we have a high scanning annual cost. So we're seeing what we saw this past year with a move towards electronic plans is a substantial savings on scanning, which will help to fund the electronic plan software. So it's sort of a switch there.
Yeah, and better for the environment, quite frankly, and yes, better for constituents. So I think, we talk about sort of the pre-pandemic, how we all adopted, and I think there are some positive ways going forward, including, I would argue, keeping ZBA hearings fully remote. Is that something that is in the works? I assume that ZBA was governed similarly to the council, where we would need special permission or a change in state law. I presented a home rule petition for the council, but I would certainly extend that to other city agencies. So
I'll let Chris speak to the policy side, but I think more broadly, we're looking to bring learnings from this time period forward wherever permitted.
Yeah.
But I'll hand the policy side to Chris.
You're exactly right, Councilor, about sort of the open meeting law provisions that require in-person hearings for board members. I think what we have learned is that the virtual access to the hearings is incredibly important to constituents. And I think, barring a change in legislation, we will have to return to sort of in-person hearings. However, I think maintaining that virtual participation for the public is something that we're definitely looking to do and continue, even if we do move back to having the hearings in room 801. I know there is some legislation that Governor Baker filed recently that would extend those remote participation provisions through September, till the beginning of September. That would be great if it was adopted by the legislature. But I
this medicine there, Chris. I mean, I know he introduced it last Monday. It seems to be pretty good appetite, I would think, for it.
I think Senate Ways and Means had written public testimony open until 5 o'clock yesterday, which is a good sign. I think that means it's moving forward. They do have until the 15th to address it, but I think there are a lot of positive signs and interest in maintaining that. So
fabulous. Good. Thank you. Well, that's certainly helpful. And so just last line on 54,900. So when you talk about lease, Kelly, is that for like literally office space at 1010 included in that figure?
Correct. It's our 1010 lease.
So pardon my ignorance. I didn't realize that you paid rent or paid the lease to the city of Boston.
We do. Yeah.
We do. I think every department has some level of payment for sort of lease, whether it's city hall or outside buildings, that covers the cost of maintenance.
Okay, fair enough. No, that's good to hear. And I want to get this in because I think, Councilor Flynn had sort of set the tone as the first questioner, and you've heard this repeated, and I would add my voice to it, and I'll be perhaps a little more blunt than maybe my colleagues. As it relates to staffing of ISD, Commissioner Leiter, I get it, and Chief Irish and others have said, we're fine, and other departments have said this as well. I think that we've seen so much work put on the men and women of ISD, and inspectors specifically, that we need an increase. And I am hopeful that when this budget is resubmitted, we will see an increase in FTEs. According to my research, in FY18, there were 224 full-time employees. That number in the presented FY22 budget has dropped to 211. The corollary, overtime costs in FY18 were $525,000. Overtime costs presented for FY22 are more than triple that, 1.8 million. So when we talk about the rental inspection, we talk about short-term rentals, when we talk about the plastic bag ordinance, when we talk about the using residential kitchens, we're putting more and more work. And despite that, I think, so many of your colleagues have worked incredibly hard. But I think that the case has been made that we need to increase some staffing. So I'm hopeful that we will see some staffing, but I'm curious if anyone wants to remark on how FTEs have gone down. And I know you've moved to animal control and some other things, but also that overtime cost that has grown so dramatically.
As far as overtime goes, I think Kelly can probably speak to the mechanics of it, but it's an accounting change in the way we process after hours work. Kelly, if you can speak cleaner.
So last year, we did do a hearing with council and passed a change to the ordinance there. Previously we were billing out for our third party, our after hour inspections. This is an optional service that can be requested for an after hours inspection with our inspectors. The contractors were being billed directly after the service was provided. That put a large burden on our administrative team in terms of just invoicing and chasing down those funds. We switched last July to a flat fee that was paid in advance of the service. And with that change, we also, the cost of that overtime is reflected in our budget as well. So that was a cost that the city had previously. It's just now reflected in the ISD budget. And we are recognizing the revenue that's coming in as a result of that service is in line with the expense.
And have we seen it? I know the answer is yes. That's why I'm asking the question. And you may have gone over this, but an increase in revenue, projected for the rental inspection ordinance, all these other things that we're doing. And I mean, why wouldn't then that actualize into additional staffing levels, particularly for our inspectors?
So on the inspectors for the past few years, so I just want to highlight, we did last year in fiscal year 21, we did 2 new health inspectors. The year prior to that, I believe we had some building inspectors. So we have been funded in the past years, and we are continuing to track as some of these new ordinances come in, tracking the level of work that our employees have. Yeah. And we'll certainly come and request if we see the need there.
Okay. And Chris, you had talked about sort of the environmental health inspector. Is that specifically tasked with the plastic bag ordinance, or is that sort of more general? Like I think Lugardi Raymond did some great work with sort of noise prevention and other things.
So the environmental health inspector that we've added to our on-call rotation is primarily focused on response to rodent complaints and trash complaints. Yeah. The plastic bag ordinance is enforced by our weights and measures division. They also, it's in line with the other work that they do in ensuring scanners and scales at grocery stores are operating properly and they do price verification. So they do the plastic bag ordinance.
Gotcha. Sorry to cut you off, Chris. So just briefly, I'll end on this. Can you talk a little bit about, this sort of disruption? It made sense given the pandemic where we temporarily suspended the plastic bag ordinance, and then it's now back as the law as of October. Have inspectors gone out and has it been complaint driven? Has it, you don't want to punish these small businesses inadvertently, but has there been some better communication to make sure everyone is living up to the ordinance?
Sure. Yeah, it's a combination of complaints, but also sort of just routine inspection. So when our inspectors have to regularly inspect grocery stores and other retail operations for compliance with sort of the price verification and the scales and things like that. So they're doing the plastic bag inspections as part of the regular course of work. I think we're doing anywhere from 20 to 60 locations a week. and sort of all of that work happens at the same time. It's you know, they're not singularly focused on the plastic bags, but it's part of their routine operations.
And are we allowing a runway, as we did with initial implementation, where a business may have purchased a significant number of the under 5M cheap plastic bags?
There was a sort of at the beginning of implementation requests to allow folks to continue using out their stock. We're not accommodating those requests at this point. So, you know, we're expecting compliance with the law as written. And that's what we're.
And there is the hardship exemption that we purposefully wrote in, so that's helpful.
I think most operations have sort of exhausted that non-compliant bag stock at this point and have really adopted it pretty widely. We do 20 to 60 inspections a week, as I said, but the number of violations we issue is pretty low. I think we have compliance.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, everybody.
Great, thank you, Councilor. Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. Next up is Councilor Edwards.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to echo a lot of my colleagues' thanks and gratitude for the hard work that you do in all of our neighborhoods. I do also want to echo Councilor O'Malley's call, and I think other colleagues, to remain or come up with a balanced approach that allows for remote access to ZBA hearings. I also think it would be helpful to make sure that we continue to have language access at ZBA hearings, whatever the status is after this is over with. So let's go into some of those things that we fought for and I think ultimately got negotiated for in the executive order that was put out by Mayor Walsh when he was here. So it did include language access. It included an ombudsman person to help orient the community when they did come to ZBA. There was conflict of interest training and also the financial disclosures of the ZBA members. There was also supposed to be a zoning amendment filed to lower the standard for disclosures of ownership in LLCs. There was also quarterly reports on the variances by neighborhood that were supposed to be done. So those are just some of the things off the top of my head. I do appreciate that you have done the tracker. I know you had mentioned you're going to add in some documents at some point. And I do know that the language has worked or somewhat with online. So let's just start with the executive order. I think the deadline for that is August.
As far as the provisions in the order, I think we're in a really good place with either having them fully implemented or implemented in some capacity that we're looking to continue to improve. Specifically, sort of the access and the language access, the ombudsperson, our CBA ambassador. The switch to remote hearings sort of accelerated our adoption of many of those provisions, which I think, you know, is a sort of silver lining to a lot of it. The ethics training we actually have it scheduled for 2 weeks from now. We'll have a full day of training for all of our board members. Especially, we have, I think, 8 recently appointed members. That we have a comprehensive ethics training program that we're working both with the State Ethics Commission as well as some external partners in our internal legal team to provide that comprehensive training. And then that'll be done obviously on an ongoing basis. The financial disclosures for board members is being done. I think the due date for those was either June 1st or May 1st. I can follow up with you on that, but that requirement has been implemented. The E-plans is moving forward. The zoning amendment for disclosures projects, we're working closely with the BPDA on figuring out the right method for that. We've done some research on project types and how it relates to sort of size, scope, and number of projects to make it, you know, meet the intent of that provision, which is to require those disclosures for all but you know, small homeowner projects. I think the overwhelming majority of building permit applications that we have defined square footage for. So, you know, the majority of our applications come in at in excess of 2,000 square feet. but it ranges, right? So we have the disclosures for projects over 100,000 square feet currently, and expanding that to make sure that we're hitting sort of home, but these small homeowner projects is it's a matter of figuring out the right threshold, I guess.
Would it be just simpler to just do projects that are not owner occupied, and then just go from there? So if you're not living in it, then yeah, and that's it. And you can own your home in an LLC and live in it, so you can apply for an exemption to that disclosure. But I think it would be as simple as that. Just have a threshold that if you are not living in the project and you're asking for and purchasing and doing all these permits in the name of an LLC, that you just disclose your ownership interest in the LLC or who owns that. I think that it's vital. It's deeply connected to how we're going to enforce other housing policies, such as affordable units, looking at portfolios, which is something that all of us want to do. There's too many developers who are doing less than 9 unit or less than 10 unit buildings to avoid having to build any affordable units, and we need to go by portfolio. And the only way we're going to know their portfolio, because they create a different LLC for every project, is who that person is, right? And so I think I hope it could be as simple as check the box, do you live in this building or not? If not, disclose who your trustee membership is, disclose who your LLC membership is, and that's it. And I also think it would be a matter of, these are supposed to be done in August, right, of this year. So the zoning amendment, I'm not even hearing that it's been drafted at all, that there's been no language put to before or even presented to, I get it if you don't want to come to the council, but at least to the zoning commission. But I would assume by August, a simple amendment lowering the threshold of things that the BPDA already does should be done.
That's the goal, to make sure it's done by August. So I think, the BPDA, they're the experts in sort of drafting the zoning language with our input and our assistance. So we are working closely with them. Hopefully we have something to present in the coming weeks.
Okay. Quarterly reports. I think another thing about being able to come up with additional zoning reform, which is what we're all like kind of nipping at with the AFFH one, this possibly, like we're all nipping at what we ultimately need of just zoning reform. And quarterly reports will allow us to know by down to the neighborhood what typical variances are happening in East Boston, how many of them, versus variances over in South Boston, versus all those different things. Now I know we're online finally, but the quarterly reports, I assume then the first quarter's report will be happening in August as well.
Yeah, that involves a lot of back end work that our dedicated analytics team here has been working on. The way the records are kept, sort of, as far as variances tied to a project, does require some data cleanup so that we have the ability to report out those things in sort of a efficient and comprehensive manner. Right now, the variances listed out are sort of text fields that are included in a zoning refusal letter, not in a reportable format.
By neighborhood.
Unlike, we could, permit type or work type or location, right? So we have to do some data work on sort of our back end side to make sure we can issue those sort of regularly and automatically.
I mean, would it help to just say as of July 1st, at least for anything filed at that date going forward, there's going to be an online spreadsheet or tracker where someone automatically is based on what's been filed or what's been granted, from the ZBA, you're going to start filling in the field. To start, I understand back end work is going to be a lot, and of course you're going to have to pick a date. I would assume the back end date would at least go to where the executive order was signed in February 2019.
Yeah, and that's a great point about sort of an interim solution and then a more formal process.
Well, I mean, if you can start with a spreadsheet, Excel, that's my technical capabilities. I'm sure you guys have much better ones, but if you were able to have by neighborhood and then the variances across the top and then just start click, 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 click in them so that people can start seeing right away the typical variances that are being put in their neighborhood. So we have immediate transparency, and then at least set a date. I'd love to hear from you guys a date that you could at least go back to when the executive order was signed. That's a year and a half. In August, it'll be 18 months, right? How soon you expect to get that? And then I know there's got to be a cutoff. I'm not expecting you to go back to the year 1900 for every variance, but we can negotiate on that. But at least the last 18 months and going forward, stepping off on the right foot. If it's August 1st, fine, when the thing is up. I would prefer for July, excuse me, so you have a month's worth of data, but just start what you can do. And then no one here is confused that you have a large lift. That's why all of us are looking at you getting more staff. I think you're the only department that we're like, are you sure you don't need more money? Are you sure you don't need more people? I mean, other departments wish they were in that position. I know coming up soon, but I did want to ask you about, thank you for your updates on the residential kitchens. And I want to say it was a joy working with all of you as well on that during our working sessions, how many times you showed up, how many great questions you answered. So I want to thank you all individually. I want to thank also, especially want to call out Dion. Thank you so much. I've been able to text you, call you, get your immediate response. And I know you're wearing two very large hats right now. So I want to acknowledge that the hard work. I know my colleagues went through and named everybody. I'm on an awkward device right now, so I can't see everybody, but I'll just collectively to ISD, thank you. I do want an update on the condo conversion. As you remember, we worked really hard, I think together again, and you worked really hard with your colleagues at DND to make sure that we came up with a new permitting process to make sure that when people went to go get the condo, there was a certain amount of notice with the city, DND, so that we could make sure people were getting notified of their rights. So how is that going? How is the new licensing or the new permit for the condos going?
In progress. We actually have our regular check-in for implementation with D&D next week to make sure we're putting that forward effectively. The permit type is ready to go. The requirements of what we're going to need as far as the applications are prepared. I think the initial submissions go to Office of Housing Stability for review, and then we will essentially wait to hear from them as far as whether somebody is cleared under the housing stability requirements to apply for the permit from us. So it's sort of that two-step process of submitting their information, being able to track that sort of from initial submission through permit issuance. There are the different requirements in the ordinance for time periods, right? And so we have the ability to monitor at the unit level, whether it's the sort of 1 year, the 5 year, that type of thing on an ongoing basis. So I think we're in a really good place with that one.
Okay, because I'm really excited to see how we can do that. I know the Housing Notification Act is probably about to be obsolete. I'm not sure if it was connected to the declaration of emergency or if it was Boston has its own timeline. If you recall, right, landlords telling us about the notice to quit when they filed the notice to quit for this moment. I assume it's permanent, or was it connected to the pandemic only? That might be an amendment we need to look at. But again, it was.
I believe it's permanent. I don't think it's directly tied into the state of emergency.
Okay, great. So how has that been going in terms of the housing notifications and being filed? I know first with OHS, and then if the person goes forward, have we gotten to the point where we found some people who have violated that? Have we been receiving complaints from tenants saying that they were given a notice to quit, but they weren't giving anything from the city? Because I know that was part of the punishment or part of the enforcement was the $300 fine.
So ISD's role in that ordinance is sort of the response, right? Through referral from housing stability and fair housing. They are sort of the primary entities that are intaking complaints and investigating them and then referring them to us for enforcement measures.
Have you gotten any referrals?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I'm happy to follow up with you after the hearing. You know, we're sort of reliant on getting the requests from the other departments to actually do the enforcement. I think that was done as a way to.
I see the gavel. I see the gavel. I'm just going to put in a nod for an additional inspector in East Boston for environment and ISD and building inspector, and also for the North End. I'm just echoing a lot of the calls that we it's not your lack of incredible work. We just think you could use more personnel. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, thanks to the panel for the great work that they've been doing throughout the pandemic, particularly Commissioner Dion Irish, who has been super responsive as his team, and Sean Leiter. That's who me and my team we've been communicating with arguably almost daily since the pandemic. So, and from my perspective, just want to make sure that ISD has the resources that they need. I know that I had joined earlier before I had to step away to attend a funeral mass, but around obviously the the Airbnbs and the short-term rental piece, the rental inspections. I mean, the Boston City Council, through a variety of different ordinances, we have put a lot extra, I guess, on your plate in making sure that that's able to be managed and that you have the resources and the personnel that you need. That's really kind of my concern, so that it doesn't take away from, rodent control and all the other inspections, the health inspections that are taking place. So maybe an opportunity for you guys to ask us if there's anything else that you guys need for us to add into this budget, or to make recommendations that some funding be increased or some additional personnel, as just referenced by my colleague who just spoke before me in terms of looking for additional inspectors. So we know the role that you guys play. It's vital on a number of different fronts. Quite frankly, ISD keeps our city moving forward. So I have zero complaints. I just want to make sure that you guys are not bashful. This is an opportunity for us to sort of find ways we can continue to collaborate, particularly given whether it's the rental inspection we put on you, or the short-term rental piece, as well as some other environmental issues that have been added. So, and I have, obviously, I'll throw a couple of questions there, and that's really like, how do we determine, how many inspectors cover a certain neighborhood? Is it based on population? Is it based on the number of establishments, whether it's retail or commercial, indoor restaurants, I guess, and then obviously I'm also surprised that the FTE will remain level this year, and I just have to think. I know that a lot of things throughout the pandemic have not stopped, and I know the calls have continued to increase. And then lastly, just on the rodent control, and probably the best question would be for Leo Boucher in terms of, are we continuing to to use the dry ice technique, which paid huge dividends when it was first introduced, and then there was a pause. I think that's now been started, and that's one of the calls pretty regularly that we've been getting is just the rodent and rat infestation. Of course, looking for food sources, largely because a lot of our shops and restaurants have been shut down. So we have seen an uptick in that. At least my phone has continued to ring on that front. And we immediately reach out to Commissioner Irish and Sean and Leo just to jump on it, and they do immediately. So just making sure that, again, resources are there, the technology, the equipment is available for you guys to do what you guys do best. So that's it in a nutshell. I appreciate your time, Madam Chair, and I look forward to listening to the answers. And again, great work on behalf of the Commissioner, his team over at ISD. There's so many unsung heroes over at 1010 Mass Ave. Too many to mention probably on this call, but there are so many times when you reach out, it usually close of business, Jill Cox. There's so many people that that you reach out to, and they, jump right on the issue and get right back to you. So I appreciate their attention to detail.
Thank you very much, Councilor Flaherty. Thank you, Councilor Edwards, and thank you. If I may be able to address a few Councilor Flaherty's, and thank you for the offer. Once again, I think that COVID, not basing everything off COVID, but we have learned to be much more efficient. during this past year with the resources that we have personnel-wise. And I think that, you know, to your question, how many inspectors, there's a couple different, how many inspectors in particular areas, they're assigned by ward, the ward's assignments, that's their base. We do have the ability, once again, to dispatch immediately from adjacent wards, adjacent individuals. And it's geographically, it depends on the amount of work going on, and you can obviously see in trends where the work is happening in the city, different areas of the city, and also the area covered. Particularly, like say, Ward 18, huge area. Ward 3, 3A, 3B, huge dimensional areas, and that dictates quite a bit is how we staff that particular area. But at all times, we do have the ability and the resources to dispatch other individuals in a moment's notice, you know, for certain situations, any situation basically. And that's input on as far as those questions there. And it's been a pleasure to work with you as past Councilor Flaherty and Councilor Edmonds.
Councilor, you brought up dry ice, which I think is a really helpful tool for us sort of in rodent mitigation. And we're continuing to use it in certain applications. There are some challenges with procuring it as far as the federal regulations go for pesticides. I think currently right now there's one distributor permitted in Massachusetts that can provide dry ice for rodent control applications. So it does take some sort of operational legwork to obtain and use, but definitely something, you know, we want to continue using it. It's a humane application and something that's been definitely very effective. I think we used it a lot in the Boston Common to great success, and so definitely something we want to continue using.
Chris, I can't see from my phone, but is Leo Boucher on? I know he knows the stuff like the back of his hand and how to procure it and where we've used it. I know we had a huge situation over in Billingsfield with a rat infestation, and I believe it played a critical role in eliminating that problem as well. So I thought at one point we had to go down to like the South Shore, maybe like Rockland or Hanover to procure this. And got to think like just think about the over at Whitehead Circle. I mean, this in the meatpacking district, there's got to be like tons of dry ice opportunities. So not quite sure sort of who's cornering the market on the dry ice, but we should be able to sort of be able to break through and penetrate through that and have our own. I guess we're a city that needs to continue to function. We do have. We're the native sort of the Norwegian rat is sort of native now to Boston. So it's not like, we don't have our share of fair share of rodent infestation issues. We do. And in order to stay on top of it, having access, the old expression, I'd rather be looking at it than looking for it. I would rather us, Inspectional Services, have immediate access to dry ice, and whether that's something over near 10 Mass Ave or another storage facility. But why we need to go all the way down to the South Shore somewhere to procure this is mind-boggling. So again, that's something maybe I can talk to Leo Boucher offline with, unless he's on this call. Is Leo on the call, Chris?
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, Counselor, but as of last week, Leo has left ISD to move on to a role with the Parks Department. So we are bummed of that loss because he was a huge piece of ISD's operation.
Got it.
As far as the procurement goes, the challenge being, I think, part of the federal EPA regulations and who can be licensed to distribute dry ice for pesticide applications. So that's part of the challenge that we see is sort of this only one company that's actually doing it.
Okay.
So.
Well, huge loss. Obviously, I was not aware of Leo moving on beyond ISD. Hopefully, we still have Bobby Chan and Ulrich and those guys are over there still as part of that team, because we got a great team over there that they do great work and just want to make sure they have the personnel and the resources they can to stay ahead of this thing. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to ISD.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Flaherty. Now it'll be my questions, and then I will go back to remaining colleagues if you have a second round follow-up, so just let me know. So I guess I did want to follow up specifically a little more on the short-term rental front. We had talked, and I think, you know, a number of the neighborhood folks have advocated for some more formal way to kind of like a more formal type of documentation to require for the folks who say, oh, I'm doing institutional housing. Because we know that there were folks who were sort of saying they're providing housing for hospitals, and what they mean is I'm in a neighborhood close to a hospital, and once I sent someone an email to say, by the way, I have an Airbnb here, which is not obviously the intent of the regulation. So I was wondering if we have any progress on that.
We do require documentation to issue those types of short-term rental permits. It's either a contract or an agreement between a corporate entity, a housing provider, and an operator of the units, whether that's a hospital or General Electric, for example. We do require that documentation upfront before we issue the permit. And that's kept on file with us. So if somebody does, and if somebody is operating in violation of that without having received a short-term rental registration number from us, we have the regular enforcement capability of requiring them to be removed from the platforms.
So I think maybe then the issue was that a number of people were just kind of posting on their Airbnb pages without a number from us, like, oh, we're hospital folks. Yep. And then for that, someone needs to find it and report it to you all.
It's a combination of things. Yes, we do respond to sort of the complaints, but we also are sort of proactive with the platforms as far as the activity reports that they provide us. So if we get a activity report every month that includes all active listings with their posted short-term rental number, if it's on there, and we have a pretty automated process of verifying that those numbers are tied to that address and they're active. If they have no number, or if they're using a fraudulent number, for example, we send an automated request to have those removed. And we do that at least monthly. I think we're sort of, as we continue to automate that back and forth process with platforms, it will probably do it more frequently and sort of in real time.
We're seeing good compliance in terms of things actually coming down.
Yeah.
Great. That's awesome. And can you guys talk to me a little bit about the sort of formal process for approving after hours and nighttime construction work? Because of the fact that I've got such, you know, significant public transit and in some places the highway like corridors running through my district. There's quite a number of projects in my district, big projects, right? Where like to land pilings, they really can only do it at night when, you know, a lane can be closed or the T isn't operating. On both ends of my district, we've got that where Flynn and I border in the sort of downtown northwest end area, and then in Back Bay, obviously over the highway with parcel 12. And it is just like pretty brutal on neighbors, obviously, to have, you know, just work happening night after night, overnight. And I'm aware that we don't control like when MassDOT can close the highway and all of that. I guess what I'm curious about is whether we think at all about kind of like, sort of like mitigating things, like ways to work with those proponents around plans that kind of at least help offer something to the neighborhood. So maybe it's something like, okay, if there's going to be overnight work, there's not also going to be regular morning work, because there's like some, you know, you're giving people some respite from the sound. I'd love to know. I have a couple of those really hard situations in my district and kind of how the department thinks through those.
I can address that, please, Madam Chair. And obviously, you know, we do realize, you know, it's a huge situation, you know, particularly in your area. The state does dictate what time these projects will go on, say over the pike or wherever they're going to be, over state property. They have total control over that. They have jurisdiction over the building department as far as the city of Boston goes. We have mitigated, or we have helped mitigate situations where companies construction companies have relocated individuals, for periods of time during construction. They, the family, the dogs, they've actually put them in different parts of the city or outside the city to, as far as an effort of appeasement. A lot of the construction companies, they do understand, that same situation. They're aware of it. But the state does dictate, and that comes down, you have T regulations coming into place. Obviously transportation, getting people into town, getting people into work. But ultimately they do dictate, and we have worked with them. And they are responsive to us, to our requests. But anything that does come down, you're more than welcome to contact this office. We can reach out. We can reach out to the construction companies, to the contractors, to whoever it may be, and sit down and try and find more mitigating circumstances to help alleviate the situation around your constituency.
Yeah, I guess I just find myself thinking that, because I think in both the case of the tower going up down around here and the parcel 12, we knew in advance that there was going to be a ton of overnight work because it was the only feasible way given the state assets and stuff. And so I find myself thinking it's like now we're having conversations about mitigation and moving people around parcel 12, for instance, but I find myself wondering, well, shouldn't we really have, and I wasn't quite a counselor yet on these, but shouldn't we have had that conversation back either at the BPDA process or the run up to the ZBA process, since it was kind of baked in inherently to a pile driving operation in these next. So that's sort of where my headspace is on it, just because it's always frustrating as a counselor to find that you can't really do anything for somebody's pretty basic quality of life issue. So wanted to raise that, and yeah, I would love to work with you guys on those, understanding of the limitations on us. I know there was a brief reference, and Landmarks in our hearing said that they had been talking to you guys, but we had a really sad situation over in East Boston, which granted is Councilor Edwards' district, but with a pending landmark that got demolished. And, I think it's pretty frustrating for folks to have it be that when kind of all signs point to something getting landmarked, that there's this nether space in which somebody can move in and knock something down. So just wondering where our conversations are on maybe not enabling that to happen.
Policy-wise, we require sort of the landmarks approval, whether it's Article 85. It's the first item on the checklist for any demolition permit. So we have to have clearance from landmarks prior to us issuing a demolition permit. We're working with the Landmarks Commission more broadly on better, more immediate information sharing between the two departments, so that we're not reliant upon the applicant to share that information with us at time of application, but we have it on hand, ready to go. Some applications for new construction have reference to demolition in their job description. We're linking permit types on the back end so that any demolition requires that short form demo permit, whether it's for new construction or otherwise. We're making sure that we're not issuing those permits until that sort of demolition checklist is completed. It's more than just landmarks. I mean, we require utility shutoff notices and approval from the utility companies and Water and Sewer Commission prior to us issuing the demo permit. And then sort of on the remedial end, if there is a violation and somebody doing work without a permit, we have our regular course of action to investigate and issue violations on the back end. Unfortunately, when it's hard to put something back up once it's already taken down. I think the case in East Boston was unfortunate. Sort of from a timing perspective, that permit was issued last year, but the application to landmark that property wasn't submitted to the Landmarks Commission until February of this year. So I think there was sort of a timing issue with that, but ISD had issued its permits last summer. I don't, the length of time between permit issuance and start of work sort of on the contractor. But I think that there was sort of some difficulties there. I think that we could probably work to improve.
Got it. Okay. Well, that's helpful context at least. Yeah. And I think just anything we can do to improve that information sharing is really important. I know that this is sort of, again, I know that ISD has a relationship to the ZBA where you staff it and you do its administrative work, but obviously, you know, that you don't control what the Board of Appeals, you know, does. They're appointed by the mayor with the council's vote, and I understand that distinction. I do wonder whether there's any sort of context that you guys could offer on the deferral process and what the history of that is, and if it has always been as we do it, and whether it really has to be as we do it, because you know, there's tremendous frustration on the part of my constituents to sort of like show up, you know, whether it's, I mean, it is easier when it's online, right? But, or if it's coming down to City Hall, and, you know, rearrange their schedules in order to be at something important where they want to make their voices heard. And then only to find that it's deferred, often because they've shown up, right? And so there's a kind of perception that if folks look around the room and say, hey, there's a few too many negative voices here, they say, let's guess again and pick another day. And I just, it seems to be a convention of ours that people can kind of, you know, ask for a deferral however many times they want. And they're not really penalized in terms of like going to the back of the line or having some limitation on the number of times they can defer. And it's not clear to me how much that's all dictated and essential versus how much that's kind of our practice and procedure, and whether it's something that we could adjust. And so I wanted to ask you guys about that.
Deferrals are definitely something that we know are of importance to the public. I think, you know, you sort of touched on it as far as the jurisdiction to the authority to issue those deferrals. I mean, it is within the board's discretion to grant a deferral. I know the chair has recently started opening up our hearings with sort of a statement about the number of deferrals and their desire to discontinue that practice or not be so forgiving to applicants that request repeated deferrals. You know, there are definitely instances where a deferral is necessary, and you know, we may not know about that, you know, up until the hearing begins. So we try to sort of manage it on the information side. But you're right, it is the board's discretion to sort of grant the request for a deferral. But I think it's sort of operationally speaking that they are really trying to discourage that. And, you know, I think it only recently, I think there's been some denials for deferrals. And I expect we'll see that more.
Good. Well, that's good news. And in terms of the board, I think we had prior conversations about sort of the mechanism of perhaps doing policy briefings for the board, both on, because I think there's several areas in which the city sort of adopted policy, but it's not, you know, the board doesn't necessarily take actions in line with that policy. And I think if the board is sort of intentionally doing that, that's one thing. But I think there's been some concern that the board is not fully apprised sometimes of kind of where things have landed. And I know that's come up in terms of compact living units. I also know that it's come up, and we've discussed it considerably, about electronic billboards. And so I wonder, Chris, I think we had talked about you guys possibly doing some kind of a policy briefing or in conjunction with BPDA on some of these things. And I'm wondering whether there's any progress on that.
Yep, definitely there. So, you know, it's a combination of a couple of things. You know, we have 8 board members that have been appointed in the past 12 months or less. So we do have a lot of new faces on the board. And while it is their sort of discretion to hear cases and grant variances, it's our responsibility to make sure we're providing them with as much information sort of about the changes to the zoning code or updates to other city policies, so that they are able to make more informed decisions at the hearing time. We are working with the BPDA to sort of design some of that zoning related briefing. We can provide the information. They can decide what they want, but that ongoing training I think is super important to make sure that everybody is aware of sort of the big picture when it comes down to decision day. And while they may continue to make those decisions in spite of or in light of the information that we provide, I think ISD's role is really to make sure that they have that information available to them. And any specific topic areas that I think we could improve on. You mentioned a few of them. I think those ongoing trainings we'll continue to do and make sure that they are as up to date as possible with sort of the whole universe of development.
Great, thank you. I have one or two more questions, but I want to go back to my colleagues for whether they have any second round questions. So Councilor Mejia, do you have any second round?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And Councilor Edwards?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm gonna figure out how to deal with my technical issues, so I'll just stay off camera. Again, thank you so much for the follow-up on all of the matters. I did want to go specifically into, and I know Councilor Flaherty talked at length about rodent control. That has been an issue in East Boston with increased development. I had heard some of your testimony about working with developers, specifically as they go to build. So I'm curious if there's a conversation about mitigation they do in preparation of the property before they break ground. I don't know if you wanted to increase the amount of rat traps or rodent traps that are happening before they break ground and we're ready to go. And also, I know the dry ice, it was a back and forth. So I'm just that aside. So that what conversations are you having with developers to make sure that they are held responsible and at least putting out some decent efforts before they break ground and while and during the mitigation as their project is being built? I know that a lot of it doesn't help that many people still don't use trash barrels in their neighborhoods. They just put the bag out there on trash day. So between that and the increased amount of development kind of moving rats around, we are seeing an increase in East Boston. I also wanted to talk about, we had a good back and forth about sober homes. If you recall, we were talking about a new sober home coming in, and one of the issues is, and I learned many of them are not compliant with the short-term rental law, that they rent weekly to some of their tenants or to some of the people who need the support services. So that's one thing. And then on top of that, what is your relationship with them in terms of their is there any notice to ISD about sober homes? Is there any working relationships between ISD, Department of Mental Health, and the homeowner? This is not to add to the stigma of people who are trying to get healthy. This is more to because of the stereotype of so many sober homes that have done wrong by people trying to get healthy and have not been the best neighbors. I welcome any nonprofit or any person who wants to help people get well, but there have been, as you know, some folks with no scruples who've come into neighborhoods and done not the best by those neighborhoods. So if you could speak to sober homes and speak to rodents and developers, what we're doing. And that's it for me, Councilor Bach.
I'll take the lead on the rodents. Obviously, it is a problem, and it's been an increased problem, in the past year with, food source basically dying down downtown. They're going to scatter and they're going to look for food sources. But we are currently, working on ways to get developers to step up to the plate more so, and with increased transparency as far as what they're going to do in more detail. We're looking into engineering. We're going to want engineered documentation as far as what they will do now. And they do have professionals, obviously licensed professionals. That is a requirement to break ground here. Licensed professionals will be handling debating. We want more. And we are just currently right now in discussions with to achieve this goal.
and add on the road and control, the review from our environmental services division of road mitigation plans as a requirement for all new construction permits. So there is a review that happens before we issue the permit, and then sort of the response in an ongoing basis with inspections and sort of adjustments to those road mitigation plans as activity changes or we see different impacts that may not have been contemplated sort of on initial submission. As far as road sober homes go, it's a complicated situation. You bring up a great point, Councilor Edwards, about short-term rentals, and for all of our back and forth in our policy development work over the past few years, I don't think any of us really contemplated sort of that intersection between sort of living arrangements and the short-term rental law, and I think that's probably something we definitely need to explore further. Our relationship with the state is, we're not notified of when a sober home is opened. I think the state regulations and the federal regulations on them do present some challenges sort of with identifying and locating. I mean, these are residential operations, whether it's a sober home or a regular living situation. So we enforce the housing, the sanitary code and the building code. As far as the licensing side of things, there is a voluntary licensing process at the state, but it's sort of not a mandated license requirement, and I think that has much to do with fair housing law and ADA requirements. So it's definitely a complex situation that I think involves some further consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Great, thank you so much, Councilor Edwards. And for me, sorry, let me just pull this up here. It's a sort of specific case that came up this week, but I'm kind of curious about the general. So there's an active building permit on a building. It's in that but it's in that in-between space where like a bunch of things have been stripped out of it. A bunch of the sort of windows are sitting empty, but no work's going on right now. The fire department just put up one of those red X's on the outside. And so I've got nearby neighbors of the building who feel like it's a fire risk and are kind of like, well, how long do I have to live with it in this state? And what's the obligation of the owner to secure it? And obviously, these neighbors would rather not have the fire risk than, have the prospect of suing the owner down the road if something bad happened. So I'm sort of curious as a counselor. I'm still in my first term, so trying to figure out kind of what the avenues of pursuit are on a case like that.
I can speak to address that one a little bit, Madam Chair. If it's open to the elements, we do have tools in place we can force them to close the building. The red X, not necessarily a fire hazard, but a lot of times that means not to fight that, not to go inside that structure for the fire if to respond to a fire. Most likely the utilities are shut off in that building. If it is open to the elements, we do have enforcement tools to make them tighten up that building. If it becomes, if it grows and grows, we have other ways, for protection of adjoining properties. We do have enforcement tools that we can put into place as far as helping that project move along.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, and I think my office is already following up on this specific one, but and it is, I mean, it is open to the elements. There's a lot of windows that, you know, there's sort of a gesture towards covering some of them, but not all and not in any effective way.
Please contact with the editors.
Yeah, we will. All right, that's good to know. And then, and just, I guess, like, sort of circling back on something a few counselors have said, I do find still like a substantial number of folks reaching out to me because they haven't heard back from you all about a building permit. And I know, to your point, Commissioner, that there's two sides to every story, and there are certainly cases where somebody just filed something and now they want it all approved yesterday, right? And we all encounter those in this line of work. But I do know that back in, I think it was the winter, there was a considerable backlog. There was a COVID sweep through ISD, and we had a bunch of people out. And I remember, I don't know if I have the dating right, but at some point in the last year, that's been the case. But you mentioned that sort of new filings are kind of back up to 19 rates. So where are we in terms of a backlog that might have come out from the COVID protocols and people being out, and what are the kind of prospects of clearing that?
I can say, Madam Chair, that a lot of the backlog was because of COVID protocol that needed to be provided to this department, and going back and forth. And I can look at, you know, many situations where the correspondence gone back and forth 3-4 times asking for the COVID protocol that had to be supplied to this department before any permit was issued. Going forward, COVID protocol is going out the window. Now it's recommendations. It's going to make it a lot easier for individuals to input the information that they need to. They're already used to it, that they need to in order to obtain that permit and have a quicker turnaround time.
And just to add, you know, some of it is, you know, I like to say we're a very high performing department, and when we are open to the public in the past, for short forms or trade permits, you could come in, apply, and get your permit the same day. With our move to sort of exclusive online and virtual interaction between applicants and administrative and inspection staff here, it does create some delay in processing time when it's a lot easier to get the right information out of somebody when that we need to review the permit when they're standing in front of you. And I think the back and forth over email and phone call does sort of create some delay. But I think we're slowly returning to this rapid turnaround time particularly for those smaller permits. The volume, as you said, we're back to pre-pandemic levels. I mean, we saw a small dip in the spring of last year, but we're humming along at, you know, tens of thousands of permits, applications submitted and reviewed and issued. I think our goal is to get back to that sort of within 24-hour turnaround time on the smaller permits. The larger ones, the long form permits, those do take a lot of review. They have a longer review process. And our goal is to have those done, you know, within 30 days. But again, it does involve a lot of back and forth with applicants. I think as we move to reopen the building fully to the public, we will hopefully see some improvement there as well.
Got it. And so do you have a sense of like how much of a backlog we're looking at, or when we think? I mean, I get obviously the ambition is to go back to that level of service. Like, do you have now that we kind of know what our timeline is on reopening, do you have a sense of like, should I mentally be like, oh, it's probably going to take us the summer, it's probably going to take us to the end of the year? Like, based on what we know we're sort of getting through, what do you think?
I can address that, please. I think as far as backlog goes, if you contact this office, you know, we can look into that backlog, what's considered backlog, and see where it is held up. And that's been protocol. What's holding it up? And we respond to the individual. What do we need? We need your license. We need your updated credentials as far as your Maddox Higgins policy. Backlog there's no excuse for short forms on the backlog. They have backlog. If there is a backlog as far as that goes, anyone in your constituency, they're welcome to call, email, get this office, and we will look into it immediately. There should be no backlog on short forms.
Got it. And what about on long forms?
Long form's a different story because a lot of times it's a much more complicated process, obviously, and there could be the backlog. Once again, it's probably a matter of communication back and forth and lack of documentation provided to the department. And
yeah, the documentation for long forms is much more complicated than what we need for a short form. And the reviews are much more in-depth and detailed. It's a full zoning code review, a building code review, a fire code review. So that does take time. I mean, we're talking large plan sets. This is new construction or major alterations. And I wouldn't say a backlog as far as sort of a delay in reviewing, but it's sort of that back and forth with applicants to make sure we have the right information and what we're looking for. Some of our document submission checklists for those long form permits, it's impacted by location, type of work, and occupancy or intended occupancy. So we'll need different things. A flood review or an environmental review or, conservation commission, to name a few. So they are complicated, and making sure that we have all that information up front is important. I think part of our goals for the next fiscal year is to really provide all of that guidance to applicants on the front end so that submissions are as close to complete as possible upon initial submission. So we don't have to do a lot of that back and forth. Can you send us this document? Can you upload this? I think we want to make sure that we're providing that information on the front end to help people through and make sure that they are aware of what our documentation is, requirements are. A complete submission, it's great. We can turn that around pretty quickly, but it does, that sort of back and forth and trying to find everything does take some time. So, a public awareness and education is one of our overall goals for the next fiscal year, and certainly ways to improve that and information that we should be providing that we're open to working with the council to make sure we're getting that out there in the most appropriate format possible.
Yeah, no, it seems like as part of, and obviously, like we've all discussed, ISD's made leaps and bounds here, right? But like the more things are electronic, the more people are able to check their own status. I do feel like there's frequently situations where people are like, to your point, like what's holding it up? And then you go and ask, and it's like, oh, well, you need to provide this documentation that you haven't provided. But I wouldn't say it's always the case that lack has been clearly communicated to the applicant. And as a counselor, I would just like to say that I would rather not be a necessary piece of that communication. So yeah, I think it's great to hear, and appreciate Commissioner, the sort of like the sense of like short forms, like those should be pretty automatic. Like you should.
Yes, they should.
Yeah, good to know. And hopefully we will, as you say, be back there pretty shortly. Okay, I think. I guess just if you could give, just as we conclude, just one more sort of quick update on, did all of the new investments that the council funded last year come to fruition in terms of like actually hiring and actually, right? Because that's always the question for us is like, are the things that we sort of fund, like then do we get around to them? And last year was a weird year, right, with COVID. So did those things all happen? And what feel like since as several counselors have mentioned, you guys are sort of level staffed, what feels like the key additional things that are coming in this year's budget to help ISD operate? It's really more of a kind of summary for the public watching at home to understand.
Kelly.
Yeah, I can kick that off and please jump in. So in terms of what was funded last year, we were funded for 5 new positions, 2 health inspectors, 2 head clerks for our ZBA operations, as well as paralegal. We are me get the details of this correct. We have hired and will be onboarding one of the head clerks, and the other is listed for the ZBA. So we are well into the process for both of those, and we'll be staffing up. The hiring freeze and COVID-related delays are why we are later into the fiscal year for these hirings. And then the paralegal also has a start date. So those are all moving, and we're excited to have those staffed up. I think a lot of the questions around how we continue the virtual experience for those hearings, provide the educational support to constituents going through the ZBA process, having that additional staff on hand will help us to be able to provide that. And then on the health side, we have one offer that is extended and another one that is currently posted. And we've also had a lot of internal promotions and movement within the department. So in addition to those positions with health, we've seen some promotions into our assistant commissioner position there and other hiring related to that. Other items that were funded outside of our budget, we do deep collaboration with Do It. So we have funding in the form of support and resources from them for our the e-plans project was a few years back. We're pushing that forward. Also support for mobility. And then going into next year, we have support from them for continued efforts to improve our content on boston.gov. That speaks to our educational efforts and instructional efforts, as well as support from them to continue bringing additional applications online. So we're strongly resourced in that area as well.
Great. Anything? So a lot of these people are actually going to come online this summer.
Correct.
Okay. So we look forward, as you do, to the transformed workflow as a result. Commissioner Chief Irish, anything you want to add? I think I've come to the end of my questions, and I don't believe we have anyone signed up for public testimony, so I think we're close to the end here.
All good here, Madam Chair, but thank you very much for welcoming. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Yeah, same here. Thank you for a robust hearing, a lot of good questions and good suggestions that we will certainly process and get back to you on. And you all will find that there's been a lot of new activity with respect to the Boston Celtics that you all can catch up with after the hearing.
Excellent.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you. Let me add my congratulations both to you, Chief Irish, and to you, Commissioner Leiter. And I hope to meet you in person sometime soon, as that begins to be a thing again. And let me just say thank you to the hardworking folks at ISD. It's not the it's kind of the not sexy, like behind the scenes guts work of the city. But it's really like, you guys and maybe water and sewer that keep everything kind of moving around here. So we're really grateful to you for that work. And certainly it's true that there are a few departments that have as many counselors saying, don't you really need more folks? So we're grateful to you for all that you do. With that, this hearing of the Boston City Council's Ways and Means Committee is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who, you're so handsome.